Tonight on Global National, honoring two hockey brothers whose lives were cut far too short. The growing memorial to Johnny Gaudreau.
Been devastated since I found out the news.
And his brother Matthew, who while cycling were killed by a suspected drunk driver. The World Health Organization races to control a life-threatening disease in Gaza.
We're not sure that there have been any efforts on this scale anywhere in the world in recent time.
The mass vaccination campaign in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Concerns over care.
It means that people are forced to transfer to another facility.
Why some patients in Alberta are worried about the kinds of medical services they'll be able to receive. Plus, new details on the assassination attempt against Donald Trump.
He had a grievance and he had a gun.
The lengths the young man is alleged to have gone, as the motive remains a mystery.
Global National, reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Condolences continue to pour in for former Calgary Flame Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew, a day after the world learned about their tragic passing. The pair was killed on Thursday night by an alleged drunk driver who remains in jail pending a detention hearing on Thursday. The hockey world, meanwhile, and those who knew the brothers best are remembering them today in countless tributes. Our Craig Momney is at Calgary's Saddledome, where fans have been arriving in droves. Craig?
Many know the area around Saddledome as a place for cheering, but today it was silent. It's been nonstop here at the steps as hundreds of fans have come to pay their respects to former Flames forward Johnny Gaudreau, who lost his life along with his brother Matthew late Thursday. Some have been dropping off jerseys, while others flowers and bottles of Gatorade. I've spoken with many of them here today who tell me they didn't want to believe the news about Johnny's death, and being here, it made it real.
Been devastated since I found out the news. I really thought I was in a bad dream when I woke up and heard about Johnny and his brother.
Really sad about this. You know, I've always grown up watching him and loved him, so this is a really big shock to me.
He brought so much heart to Calgary, and we're going to miss him so much, and my heart goes out to his family.
Today, Johnny's wife Meredith taking to social media with a message to her husband saying, "Thank you for the best years of my life. Despite losing you, I'm still the luckiest girl in the world to have been yours." A GoFundMe has been set up for Johnny's brother Matthew, who was also killed in the crash. So far, more than $300,000 has been raised to support his wife Madeline and their unborn baby. The two were killed when an alleged drunk driver struck them from behind as they rode their bikes near their childhood New Jersey home. That man is now facing charges in their deaths that have left the hockey community reeling. Flames legend Lanny McDonald taking to social media saying, "Go easy on those legends up there in heaven's hockey rink, boys. You're getting there earlier than expected, but they'll take good care of you." Now, fans have also been signing a book behind me with their condolences organized by another fan, and they're hoping to have that book sent to the family. Nitu?
Craig Momney in Calgary. Thanks, Craig. Now to a disturbing and developing story from an Indigenous community about an hour southeast of Edmonton. RCMP in Wetaskiwin, Alberta, responded to a 911 call early Friday morning. It resulted in officers allegedly shooting and killing a 15-year-old boy who's from the Samson Cree Nation. Police say they received a call from the boy who told them some people were trying to harm him. Police responded and about an hour later said they found the teen armed with several weapons. That led to a confrontation and the boy being shot. He died in hospital. Alberta's police watchdog has taken over the investigation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced two more Senate appointments today, both from Alberta. Daryl Friedhandler is a corporate lawyer and mediator. Dr. Christopher Wells is a scientific expert and a champion of the LGBTQ2+ community. He's helped lead initiatives including Pride Tape, which has been used in the NHL. The Prime Minister's office says Dr. Wells has helped advance diversity, equity, and human rights in Alberta and across the country. Plans to reform health care in Alberta could result in less access to things like abortion, medical assistance in dying, and even IVF. Speaking at a rural town hall this month, Alberta's premier says her government could turn over the operation of more rural hospitals to the Catholic Health Authority, Covenant Health. Heather Yourex-West looks at what that would mean.
It's just wrong. They hurt her on purpose. They could have let her die in that room.
Heartbroken words from grieving parents in BC highlight an inequity in Canada when it comes to accessing care. Their dying daughter had to be moved from her hospital because its faith-based operator did not provide what had been her choice, to have medical assistance in dying.
It means that people are forced to transfer to another facility, so they may be in intolerable suffering, they may need pain medication, they're put in an ambulance and they're shipped somewhere else.
Hospitals operated by Catholic authorities in some provinces, including Alberta and BC, have been allowed to opt out of services like MAID, abortion, and IVF. Alberta's Covenant Health operates 17 facilities across that province, but soon that number could rise. Why is it that Covenant Health is able to keep operating rooms and hospitals open 24 hours a day, but Alberta Health Services can't? Alberta's premier said at a recent United Conservative Party town hall. It may well be that we just need more operators in the smaller communities. While the premier hasn't answered questions about her comments, the health minister's office says it's been clear the government expects better results from Alberta Health Services. But the premier's statement about Covenant Health isn't entirely true. Their rural hospitals have seen service reductions too. The head of Alberta's Medical Association says fixing this issue is a matter of recruiting and retaining more staff.
Those challenges around workforce, for example, and around the funding models to incent that workforce and the resources and the pieces around that, those challenges all lie with Alberta Health.
I think what Smith was looking for was the only other competitor we have to run hospitals, because we do know Smith is pro-choice.
Danielle Smith.
Still, Smith was elected United Conservative Party leader by what is well known to be a very socially conservative rural base, raising questions around intention as this government considers a big policy change. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
There's another tragic story about drug poisoning deaths out of BC. 2 women and 2 men were poisoned Friday after consuming hard drugs on a beach near Victoria. The 2 women are dead. The 2 men are in critical condition. This latest tragedy coming just as data from BC and Alberta points to a glimmer of hope in the drug epidemic. The BC government reported this week 1,365 people died in toxic drug poisonings in the first 7 months of this year. But the death toll in July, 192, is a 15% decrease from last July. In Alberta, there was an even more significant downward trend. There were 72 deaths in the month of May. That represents a 55% decrease from a year prior. Experts say it's not yet clear if this is a trend and are still warning of increasingly lethal drugs going around. There is an urgent effort underway in Gaza to halt the spread of a life-threatening disease. Polio is being detected in the densely populated strip. The disease, which was almost eradicated in the 20th century, affects children. To limit its spread, the United Nations is vaccinating 640,000 children in Gaza. The virus is spreading through wastewater, which is running into streets because of a lack of water treatment facilities. Taria Isri reports on one of the most ambitious and dangerous vaccination campaigns ever undertaken.
The first doses went out at one of the few hospitals still running in Gaza, marking the start of one of the most challenging immunization campaigns on Earth. As soon as we heard about the vaccine, we came, says this father. Airstrikes are everywhere, but I needed to protect my son against polio. This month, an 11-month-old boy contracted the first known case in the territory in 25 years. I'm afraid, says this mother. The disease paralyzes children for life. The reemergence of the virus is adding a new layer of desperation after 11 months of heavy Israeli bombardment.
It's a direct result of the conflict, the fact that the health system has been essentially decimated, the fact that water and sanitation infrastructure have been destroyed, people are malnourished, they're displaced, they're living amid garbage and lakes of sewage.
Israel and Hamas agreed to allow aid workers to deliver vaccines for around 8 hours a day in specific areas over the next 72 hours.
Not doing anything would be really bad. We have to stop this transmission in Gaza, and we have to avoid the transmission outside Gaza.
Gaza is in ruins. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced. The vaccines need to be refrigerated in a place with no electricity, just generators. But the biggest challenge may be safety. Relief workers have come under fire during the conflict. Just this week, a U.S. aid group says its convoy was hit in a deadly airstrike, while the World Food Program paused the movement of its staff after a vehicle was shot.
It's a very complicated effort. We're not sure that there have been any efforts on this scale anywhere in the world in recent time.
Aid workers need to reach 90% of children in Gaza under 10 to stop transmission and prevent a wider public health crisis. Taria Isri, Global News, Montreal.
Up next, the new details about the man who shot Donald Trump and the evidence he spent days scouring for the best way to kill the former president. Police in Pennsylvania say a man will face misdemeanor charges after he stormed into the press area of a Donald Trump rally last night. The man was subdued by police and no injuries were reported. The incident comes amid heightened scrutiny of security at the rallies of the former U.S. president. This week, investigators released new details of the assassination attempt on Trump in early July. As Mike Armstrong explains, they reveal more about what happened, but the question of why remains unanswered.
The FBI is calling the planning of the assassination attempt on the former president a detailed and sustained effort. But Thomas Crooks, it says, may have only chosen Trump as a target of opportunity.
In the 30 days prior to the attack, the subject conducted more than 60 searches related to President Biden and former President Trump.
The Bureau this week released photos from its investigation. It says Crooks carried his weapon in pieces in this backpack, gained access to the roof by climbing on this air conditioning unit, and then fired 8 shots toward the podium from his semi-automatic rifle. Crooks was eventually killed by a single shot to the head from a Secret Service sniper. The FBI also released an image of 2 explosive devices Crooks left in the trunk of his car. They had not been turned on. Now, the FBI may know what happened every second of the attack. It's analyzed hundreds of hours of videos and conducted hundreds of interviews, but it's still at a loss to find a motive.
He had a grievance and he had a gun.
Paul Eckloff is a former Secret Service agent. He says Crooks didn't leave behind letters or journals explaining his goals. Instead, investigators are having to piece together his background and build a profile. What they're finding is a young man with a difficult childhood who showed a progression towards mass violence.
It was going to be a school, it was going to be a mall, or it was going to be some other splashy event where he could make his presence felt.
Now, there are multiple investigations into what happened and what went wrong. Monday, a bipartisan group of lawmakers toured the site, some saying they were left with more questions than answers.
I definitely took note today that there were a lot of lines of sight that appear to have been unsecured.
Right here, right on the roof!
In the weeks since the attack, multiple conspiracy theories have popped up, basically to fill the void of the unexplained. Trump himself has at times given them fuel.
They were making it very difficult to have proper staffing in terms of Secret Service.
Well, Eckloff says the simplicity of the plan and that Crooks was working alone may lend itself to conspiracy theories, but it's also likely how he got so close to pulling it off.
A complex assassination plot with multiple co-conspirators and communication chains in the run-up to it would have provided law enforcement or the public an opportunity to intervene.
The FBI says it hasn't found Crooks's politics to lean left or right, Democrat or Republican. It says it seems to have been a mixture. What it has found are online searches for things like how far away was Oswald from Kennedy, seemingly clear signs of what he was planning, signs that were missed. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Washington.
In Asia, around the highly disputed South China Sea, the Philippines and China are trading blame over a collision involving their ships. Video by the Philippine Coast Guard shows one of its ships colliding with a Chinese Coast Guard vessel, which they say intentionally rammed into theirs. But Beijing says it was the Filipino ship that deliberately struck first. It's the latest standoff between both countries within the disputed waters. China claims it controls nearly all of the resource-rich shipping route, including parts neighboring countries have laid claim to. Tensions flare over East Coast fisheries. Ahead, the minister in the hot seat over accusations of mismanagement. There are big sighs of relief this Labor Day long weekend at the Toronto Zoo. Kambali, the orangutan, escaped his outdoor habitat on Thursday but has since been returned. Kambali, who is much larger than a monkey and part of the family of the great apes, briefly accessed this tower, climbing down to escape his enclosure. He's previously shown how deft he is at moving around. The zoo credits its quick-acting staff for returning the animal back to his home. The federal fisheries minister is under fire from industry leaders and provincial politicians on the East Coast over what they say is mismanagement. Minister Diane Leboutillier is accused of being largely absent and unresponsive to issues surrounding the recently reopened commercial cod fishery and ongoing tensions over Nova Scotia lobster. Heidi Petracek explains how fights over fisheries could mean rough sailing for Trudeau's Liberals in the next election.
After Ottawa reopened Newfoundland and Labrador's commercial northern cod fishery in June, there's now anger. It's been prematurely paused in areas where catch limits have almost been reached.
Is it just simply that our federal government wants to look after big business interests and not small communities?
The Harvesters Union accuses Ottawa and the federal minister of ignoring its call for a return to a stewardship fishery for inshore fishers only.
This is absolute travesty of and a dereliction of their duty to manage this fishery properly.
The Department of Fisheries and Oceans says in a statement the temporary closure was expected under the regulations, but the minister, Diane Leboutillier, declined an interview request from Global News on that and other issues on the East Coast as frustration piles up. In Nova Scotia, the cancelled Elver fishery, plagued by poaching, caused further controversy when Leboutillier ordered an independent review into allegations of DFO mistreatment leveled by 2 Indigenous fishers. And a group representing commercial lobster fishers has turned to the courts to rule if members of Sebaganagati First Nation are fishing illegally.
To totally ignore the situation unfolding in Nova Scotia seems beyond belief to us.
With some of the DFO's officers refusing enforcement work in Nova Scotia, citing threats of violence, the province's fisheries minister wrote Leboutillier August 22nd, requesting a meeting with you and your team immediately. Leboutillier was in Halifax for federal cabinet this week, but the province says a meeting didn't happen.
Irritated fishers don't mean Liberal voters.
This political strategist says an absent federal fisheries minister may be a sign the Liberal government is distracted by the larger affordability crisis.
Very few governments, again, regardless of stripe, are brave enough to try corrective policy in the fishery, and now is not the time to do that.
Earlier this week, the Prime Minister said his government has been listening to Canadians. When it comes to fisheries issues on the East Coast, some would disagree. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
At the Paris Paralympics, Canada won its first pair of silver medals of the Games tonight. Swimmer Nicholas Bennett from BC finished in second place at the men's 200-meter freestyle S14 final. It marks the first Paralympic medal for the 20-year-old who lives with autism. And in the women's SM7 200-meter individual medley, Ontario's Tess Rootliff also finished with silver. It's the first medal for the 25-year-old who was born with a condition that causes shortened limbs. Celebrating 75 years of the largest North American air show and the Canadian Air Force's 100th. We'll take you there next. English rock band Oasis has issued a warning against reselling tickets to their comeback tour. This after some tickets were quickly posted for sale following pre-sales, some going for nearly $8,000, more than 40 times their face value. The band is warning fans not to buy tickets from third-party sites, saying those tickets may be invalid. There were plenty of spectacles up in the skies over Toronto today as the Canadian International Air Show brought its show to town. The event is not only celebrating its 75th anniversary, it's also helping the Royal Canadian Air Force mark 100 years, all by showcasing a mix of the most iconic and state-of-the-art military aircraft. Sean O'Shea reports.
It's the event that transforms Toronto's waterfront every year, one that sees aircraft screaming over Lake Ontario. The Canadian International Air Show now in its 75th year.
We hear that a lot of generations, this is now the third generation attending with their grandkids. We just love inspiring the next generation.
Planes like the U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptor, billed as the world's most advanced stealth fighter. There's Canada's CF-18 Hornet and the Snowbirds, the military aerobatics flight demonstration team. Shows like this one are intended to entertain an audience and do something else.
And maybe igniting a spark in them that they could work in the aviation industry or become pilots.
And for some, a possible career in the military.
So that they can come and ask any questions they want about the Canadian Armed Forces, whether it be the Air Force, Navy, or Army.
This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Canadian Air Force, a point of pride for those in uniform, including its commander-in-charge.
Talk about your Air Force. At the end of the day, this is about recognizing those who have served in the past, those who are currently serving, and inspiring the future generation of your Air Force, and it's a really exciting time.
Visitors of any age can sit in a fighter jet cockpit or fly an aircraft in a simulator.
So you can get your first experience as a beginner pilot, and it's authentic and it's accurate.
Watching a search and rescue crew demonstrate how to help a boater in distress to seeing how a water bomber works to fight forest fires. It's a close-up view of what's possible. And for the Air Force, giving a taste of the future.
We have right now 5 significant contracts that we've signed in the last 2 years, $60 billion of new investment, 209 new aircraft. And at the end of the day, it's all about our people.
Like the pilots flying Canada's Snowbirds, entertaining a city at the end of summer. Sean O'Shea, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is the Cheltenham Badlands in Caledon, Ontario. Thanks so much for watching and hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.